In this week's episode, we sat down with Matt Von Bergen, the senior mortgage advisor at Partners Mortgage. Not only is he a senior mortgage advisor, but he is the definition of a true leader. And there's a variety of different ways to define leadership, but when you sit down and listen to this story, one of the phrases that's going to come up is servant leadership. It was an incredible journey taking us from his youth, where he faced adversity and challenges, and through his teenage years, then into the mortgage industry, where he faced a different type of hard and a different type of challenge. He really walks you through how to stay positive, look at the opportunity versus the challenge. And I was motivated. I was inspired. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Tell Us Your Story.
Welcome to Tell Us Your Story. Join us as we step into the arena with business owners, leaders, and influencers. Hear their stories as they navigate challenges, opportunities, and victories on their journey to success. As Theodore Roosevelt once said, it is not the critic who counts, but the man or woman who is actually in the arena.
I was actually born in New Jersey and then moved out here in my youth in elementary school. And I'm one of 5 kids, so I'm the middle child.
Okay.
So I think middle children, just my perspective, have kind of a chip on their shoulder because they're not the baby, they're not the oldest child, so they kind of get stuck in the middle, so you have to kind of climb and find your way.
And
middle child over here. So I totally agree.
And so what caused you guys to move from New Jersey out to California?
So originally from California, my dad took a job out there, and then we were trying to get back around family. So then he moved back here, and so went to school in El Dorado Hills when it was a little farm town. So now it's a pretty big town, but yeah, it was a little farm town, and we built a house out there in the 80s, and that's where I went to school.
So you're in your entire youth growing up, once you moved back, which is in the Northern California, Sacramento, but in El Dorado Hills area?
Yeah.
And what kind of student were you when you think about middle school, high school? You started a Were you a good student?
Yeah, it's a funny story because, I was a C student at best. I didn't really have I wasn't really into school. Like, the order taking, the memorizing, the kind of those things. I talk a lot about it with my kids now because they kind of teach you to be employees. And I never really had an employee mindset. And so I didn't, I gravitated, I was good at math and I was good at sports, and the things that I liked, I excelled at. And the things that I didn't like, I didn't do well at because I didn't pour into it. And what that really taught me as I aged and got older was, a lot of people probably didn't think that I would be very successful and probably didn't have a lot of faith in me if you just judged me by my grades. But the thing is, they didn't understand what I was going through as well. At a young age, actually, my little brother got a brain tumor and passed away.
Sorry.
Yeah. And so at a young age in elementary school, that happened. And then in high school, my mom got pancreatic cancer and passed away. And so I lost the 2 closest people to me at a very young age. And so I was also dealing with a lot of difficult things at a very young age. And my attention wasn't in school at the time, right? But that doesn't define who you are. What defines who you are is how you deal with problems and adversity. And so I think I matured at a very young age and learned a lot of life lessons at a young age. And so that created this different person as I grew up a little bit older to be pretty wise for my age and eventually have my own quest for knowledge and self-education. And when I wanted to learn about something, I would go all in on it and would want to be the best. And so always very competitive, always played lots of sports. And so that kind of translated into, again, the things that I was passionate about and the pursuits that I wanted to look into, I would go after it. But grades weren't the thing that I did at school.
Yeah.
That wasn't my prize. That wasn't something
It's interesting. It'd be a whole podcast conversation because I think perspective has changed from over the years, from when all of us were younger, where now you see things where sometimes it's the C students that are actually leading the companies and things like that. And not to say anything about the A students. Natasha's one of those A students. But yeah, perspectives have changed on what that actually means and the way that people learn and learning different education styles and what people are going through, which is a pretty incredible story. So how old were you when you lost your brother?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact age, but I want to So I was like 12 years old.
Oh, that's
Yeah, that's a rough time anyway, but also very. I don't know. It's different. It's hard always, but if you were younger, maybe when your memories and things aren't fully formed. But 12 is, and then your mom must have been. If high school must have been not long.
Yeah,
after.
so it was like 4 years later, when I was 16.
Oh wow.
wow. So, and when your mom went through that, was it an extended period of time that she was ill?
Yeah, so they gave her 6 months to live when they diagnosed her, and then she lived for a year and a half. So I tell people that every day for a year, I thought it was her last day. And that was a really hard year because you're just kind of like, you don't know what to think. And you're like, don't want to see them in pain, but then you want them to be there as long as possible and pull out of it. But you're stuck in this twilight zone where it's like this in between. And, it was a difficult time every day for a year.
Wow. And so people deal with, tragedy and trauma and loss in a lot of different ways. So how did you, when you think back to that time, how were you coping after the losses? Did you act out? Like, what was your life like?
Yeah, initially, I think you kind of go through like this why me phase and, kind of add a little bit of some acting out because you're not really sure how to process the information. But I like to start with sharing this story because everybody's going to go through it, right? And it's going to be at a different time. And I've spoken with a lot of people over the years as they've lost somebody and as they've gone through that. And, the main thing that I always try to tell people is that it's either a crutch or a catalyst. And there's two different ways that you can process a loss. You can either use it as a reason and an excuse to mess up and to blame things and to use drugs and alcohol to, whatever you want to do and justify it. And you can justify the means and you have the right to do that. And it's a good reason to be upset about something, right? Or you can change it and transform it into something positive. And the main thing that I did with my mom was that I had the thought in my brain that if I don't have success and carry this on, then everything she ever did for me was for nothing. And so I chose to use it as a catalyst. And I'd say that my flame of desire on the inside burned a little hotter after that. And so I'm way more passionate and I pursue things at a lot harder pace than most people because of those losses that I've had, because I carry more than just my weight. It's not just about me. I carry it on for my legacy and my family, my current family, my past family. And so those things all add to your flame of desire or passion or whatever you want to call it on the inside.
Yeah, that can be heavy. Have you ever felt the weight of that? Like when you say it, it resonates. But have you ever felt the weight of it? I'm trying to live up to something, maybe, so to speak, if I'm articulating that correctly. But have you ever felt that?
I wouldn't say I really feel like that because, I try to be a positive person and more of an optimist. And so I don't really focus on the negative side of it. I think that maybe the weight of that might be heavy for some, but I think that it's something that's just inspiring. And if you can show people that you can do it and things won't hold you back, and if there is excuses but you don't use them, that it's more motivating for anything. And so I really don't focus on that. I would say that it's never been heavy for me because I've never focused on that side of it.
It's pretty incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Not pretty incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of how you mentioned that it was a motivation, kind of turned it into this fire inside of you. So what, after that happened, you still had a little bit of high school to complete, it sounds like. Did that change maybe your thought for what was next, whether it was college or work or whatever? What was kind of did you have like a shift in dynamic there?
Yeah. So, I homeschooled my junior year, went back and graduated my senior year. Barely, and and just got through it, and then I was like, okay, what's the next chapter? So I started going to junior college in Folsom Lake Junior College, and kind of trying to find out what I want to do next. And so my dad, obviously he was dealing with the same losses and such, and so he was kind of like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to continue to do this college thing? Maybe you should start working and get some sort of job. And so I kind of started working. My very first job was at Walmart in the middle of the night as a stalker. So I stocked shelves, not a crazy stalker like following people, but stocking shelves in the pharmaceuticals in that section. And that's where I had my first job. And what I always kind of would do when we were walking by during the day was there's this little booth where this guy sold cell phones. And I walked by the booth and would always conversate with him. And one day he's kind of talking about, man, you talk with people, like, have you ever thought about cell phones or whatever, and so their store was in the parking lot, like their main store. And so one day I was just kind of like, oh, let me pop by and see what's going on. And so anyways, I conversated with the manager over there, and I knew some people that actually worked at the company, and they were doing pretty well. And so I was like, hey, maybe I should pursue this. So I got a job in sales, and I started selling cell phones. And so I was, I think like 19, 20 years old roughly, and excelled at it, and ended up being one of the top producers. And 20 years old, was making $100,000 a year selling cell phones.
Wow.
Yeah, I have to ask a question here, because this is where we geek out, because our background is sales and things. That's what we love. So at 20 years old, you're selling mobile phones. Are they putting you through regimented sales training, or are you just natural? And
no training.
No training. So you're just out there slinging cell phones, making $100,000 a year. Are you living it up yet? Are you having a good time?
I'm living it up. I'm spending every dollar. I'm 20 years old, and I have a bunch of broke friends. And I'm kind of everyone's coming to my house. I'm hosting.
Mm-hmm.
And so, obviously, like the money. Did you like sales? Did you know what was happening at the time? Like when you look back, you can see this as a foundation probably for where you end up, ending up. But did you know did you know you were in sales, like the career of sales versus the job of sales?
I was always selling, and selling people on ideas, selling, hey, let's do this. Our house was kind of the house where everybody came and hung out, because I was one of 5 kids, right? So all of us were always hosting and having like friends over at our house. So because I was always, probably middle child, friends of all ages and groups all the time, there was always something going on, always conversations and debates. And so I was always kind of that, I don't know, kind of selling people on stuff, I want to say. And so, yeah, I thought it was something that I'd be good at, and people had told me that I'd be good at it. And, they stuck me in these stores right when you start out with no business, where nothing's getting done. Kind of like, here's the lame store, go sit there. One phone's been sold the last 2 months, and all of a sudden, like the first week, there's like 6 phones being sold out that store. And they're like, hold on a second. And you're like, what are you doing over there?
Yeah.
And, kind of put myself on the map.
Wow.
I love it. So how does that evolve? So are you staying in school? Like, throwing 100,000 at you at that age, are you like,
that was the ticket of, I figured out what I wanted to do.
I remember, so I made 35,000 a year and I stopped going to school. So 100,000, I would have thought I completely made it. So what's the next step? What's the evolution for you as you're moving on in your career?
Yeah. So I quickly realized this, again, one of the top producers, I realized I'm good at this. And, they changed companies and sold out and changed comp plans and management, and, things happen over the years. And a lot of people that were working there left, and, we're still friends and still same circles. And they started showing me checks of what they're making in the mortgage industry.
And what year is this?
So this was 2004.
2004, probably a really hot year. Those checks were big.
Yeah. So, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this guy wasn't very good at selling cell phones.
Yeah.
And I was pretty good at it. And so I think I could do a lot better than him in the mortgage industry. That's honestly how I got my start. So,
wow.
Yeah, I kind of had like my last, like, another commission change, and, we were working twice as hard to make maybe now 60,000 or something like that. And I was kind of like, hey, I'm worth 100, And so these guys again showing, I was like, hey, let me go do this. So enough people left, enough things happened, and I'm like, I'm going to go pursue the mortgage industry. And so that's where I got started. It was in 2005.
And so what does that look like? So within that industry, I'm going to guess that you have to be licensed. You're not just walking in and all of a sudden selling mortgages. So how does
you weren't at that time, actually?
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was no license at that time.
Oh, that
I think
makes
I saw a documentary on
that clears up a lot.
The Big Short. If you guys haven't seen that movie, go check out The Big Short.
Okay, yes.
That'll come 2008 and 2009. We'll get there.
We're almost there. Okay, so you're leaning into, again, it seems like it's pretty self-taught. You just hit the ground running. How did you build up your clientele? What was that like starter journey like?
So have you guys ever seen the movie Boiler Room?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I walked into Boiler Room. So it was the first week that I was there. Black coats walked out, some guy in my branch, like right, kind of a couple people next to me, He was like FBI or whatever. They busted him for manufacturing W-2s.
Wow.
It was the first time I ever seen somebody do drugs on the table right in front of me.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
it was a wild, wild west, and it was crazy, and it was trial by fire. So, you know, what I went in there doing is working harder than anybody. I'm like, hey, I'm going to outwork everybody, stay late, work weekends, and I'm going to learn this industry and I'm going to grind it out. So I'm naturally a grinder. And so I went in and started doing the work. I couldn't even get close to some of these guys that were putting up numbers. And so you're wondering, like, how is this even possible that people are putting up? Because they always report like the numbers of what people are doing. We pretty quickly realized that the game was rigged. There was, you know, the prize kids that were put in certain rooms and fed all the good leads. There was the people that were making loans fraudulently and cheating in order to get ahead. There was that everybody had a different story. And so if you were somebody that did things ethically and by the books and you worked super hard, I could only get so far. So I'd get like to like the 70 percentile, but I couldn't hit like the top tiers. So I was at, you know, top producer for the most part, but you know, I'd get crushed by these people. And then later down the road, you found out that they weren't doing business, you know, the right way, or that they were kind of cheating almost to get fed the leads to beat you.
Getting the Glengarry, Glen Ross leads.
Wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't really fair, but as I worked there for a couple of years, those people kind of got weeded out. And then I eventually kind of rose and, you know, got into leadership. And how I kind of made my name in that at that time was they were nationwide, and I was second voice in East Coast deals. So basically in California, which is where we're at, you know, a lot of Californians couldn't handle the New Jersey, New Yorkers on the phone, you know?
We sold across the nation as well. So
those were tough for me. When I first started and I was just learning, it was basically my intro to the cell phones. When I started selling, I was like, you had a New York or a New Jersey on the phone, and I'm like, get off, and I like wipe my little tear and just keep moving.
It's tough.
It was tough.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I don't want that call again, but I'll take it.
I was like, why do you want to fight with me? He's like, what? It was just a conversation. It took me, it was a learning curve for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I just got that East Coast mentality. I was born in New Jersey. And so like, even though it's young, I kind of have that East Coast, keep it real. I've always just been able to have those conversations. Right. So I was second voice in East Coast deals, and deals that were like, they were basically going to cancel. Right. I got them back on the hook and worked and closed them. And so they were like, wow, like you can handle those guys. Okay. We'll start feeding you some of those deals. And so that's kind of how I got my start in name at the very beginning of the mortgage industry.
So I want to ask a question here. And so I've been in sales for 30 years, and I worked in a similar, in the boiler room situation when I first started. And everybody makes a choice at some point when you're sitting in those rooms and you see that there is always going to be an unethical type in the sales. It doesn't matter where you go. And they're going to make more. They're going to do better for a short period of time. They always fizzle out. Always happens.
Yep.
But we all make a choice in whatever industry we're in when you're in sales, that which path are we going down? So, and it's a very personal choice. How did you make that choice of, I'm going to do it the right way versus chasing those big checks? Yeah. And for those who are not in sales, it really is a choice. The blueprint to be bad is there just as it is to be good.
And you're rewarded if you do it.
Yeah.
In money, if you want to chase that route. But yeah, you know, it comes down to my parents. So I 100% have to say that they taught me core values, you know, and integrity, doing what's right, you know, being a good person. So, you know, I didn't know really what core values were at the time. I'm real big into core values now and making sure I have those principles and things instilled in my kids. But yeah, they raised me to know what's good and bad, right and wrong, and make sure you man your word and doing the right thing.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And, you know, as we continue to go down your story, again, we talked about it, like just geek out on this stuff. So as you are representing your customers today, it's such a foundation for people to know, like as we're having this conversation, you know, 20 years ago when you started off, you made a decision not to do that. And you've built your reputation and your business based on ethics and your integrity. And so when someone comes to work with you, if you listen to this, they're going to know that's what they're going to get from you. And I'm sure we'll get more into it, but it's so incredibly important. Personal brand and who we are in representing clients. It's huge. So kudos to you for, otherwise we probably wouldn't be sitting
at
here.
At a time where it was so heavily, like just blatantly out there, like you said, you know, I think that's good to be able to start and maintain integrity in that situation. I think after, which we'll talk about kind of the crumble of all that and people who, fizzled out. But yeah, I think it's crazy. So, take us to, obviously everyone knows the 08, 09 kind of, how did that whole time period go for you?
Yeah, so I was eating a lot of top ramen.
Oh, this story has changed.
Yeah, so it was pretty feast or famine and in our industry, and it was famine at that time. So, taking lots of calls, actually very busy, but the calls were always, hey, can you help my mom? And then the mom would get on the line and people were, referring me business and friends and family and old clients and, lots of phone calls, but everybody was losing their house and upside down and, crying on the phone because they're like, hey, I'm behind a couple mortgage payments. Can you do anything? And it's like, I couldn't do anything. And so the most difficult part of that time being in the mortgage industry is that you were taking these devastating calls from people that you knew that it was their parents or people that they cared about, and you couldn't help them. And so there was so few deals because, a lot of them were saying, hey, you have to go late on your mortgage before we'll even talk to you about doing something or modifying your loan, or like they started talking about modifications. It was real early, but so people were kind of misled, about you have to be late and you have to do this before we'll even talk to you. The banks were telling the people that. And so, I really couldn't help them. I couldn't refinance them if they're behind on the mortgage. No new lender wanted to take a foreclosing borrower on their books, right? They only wanted to have good loans. And so there was very little business to be made, but there was tons of activity and it was all just really difficult. So going up every day and just like going home and then waking up the next day to know, okay, I got to take some more devastating phone calls. I'm probably not going to make any money. Don't have any money really. And I hadn't been in the industry that long where I'd had like any nest egg, right? So we were kind of surviving off of my wife's, pizza restaurant job. And I was renting a foreclosure from a guy who was a friend of a friend for $1,000 a month. Because he was foreclosing the property. He moved out and wasn't making the mortgage payment. So he's like, hey, you can just live in there as long as you can for $1,000 a month. And so
Wow.
that was kind of like swinging from, as long as I can in this foreclosure. Learned about this program called Cash for Keys, where eventually the banks would take it over and then they would pay you to get out versus you squatting, essentially. So being on the inside, I negotiated Cash for Keys. Got like a $7,000 paycheck. That was like the only check I made that month.
Wow. Were you thinking at this time, and you might be getting to it, were you having like the ideas of jumping ship, like going back to phones or something?
Absolutely. Everybody was leaving and going to solar. That was the new hot thing that had just come out. But I'm working on writing a book right now about my story, and the kind of story talks about this exact moment. And it was a moment in time where I had to say, okay, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, right? Are you gonna quit and then come back to this industry or go do something else? Or are you gonna see this through and stop kind of playing, I don't say victim mentality, but kind of like, poor me, woe is me kind of in the mortgage industry. And when I finally came to the conclusion that, what, this is a temporary thing, it eventually will pass. And if all these people in the mortgage industry are leaving, that when it turns, I'll have more opportunity, right? I'd been working really hard to keep up, and all these people that had gotten kind of spoon-fed and done really well were all leaving now because it was too tough. And so that was the moment that I talk about in my book where, the beast was, I woke up the beast within me. And so that was a moment where something kind of deep down inside of me, came to life, and it was like this, okay, I'm going to get to work and I'm going to make this work, and I'm no longer going to wait for things to turn. I'm going to go make things happen. So instead of things happening to me, I'm going to go make things happen. And it was a different transition in thought. And that came like in the middle of 2009.
Yeah, and so, which is incredible. A couple of questions there, which I don't know, and listeners probably don't know. Are you on salary or 100% commission during this time?
Yeah. So let me think. So there was some of the jobs I was at were salary plus commission. I want to say at this time I had a small base salary of like $1,200 plus commission.
Not a lot is what I'm getting. Like,
Yeah.
This is all, it's all performance based. And So you make this decision, and I would imagine as we're going through these years, every conversation you're having, every rough day you're having, which I think is just incredibly important for people to understand, especially younger generations coming up. This is where your expertise is coming from. Like today, I would imagine you can go back on a customer or client a day and say, oh, I can help you. I did this. That other people just can't. Fair?
Yeah.
That to me is when I talk to people about the long journey, like what people are going through right now is what's going to end up making them a success later down the road. It just sets you apart. So walk us through waking up that beast. What did it look like?
So, for the younger generation, I definitely want to kind of speak to them real quick about overcoming adversity, right? There's something to be said about the most difficult things in life make or break you, right? And the willingness to know that you're going to show up to work and know it's going to be difficult and know that there's probably a long tunnel that you're going to have to walk down before there's light that comes through. A lot of people don't want to make that walk, but you don't know when it will turn, and everything is temporary and things will change. And after every winter comes spring. And so you just have to be able to see that, going in every single day, focus on the day. Don't look at the giant picture, right? It's like how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? You just focus at the day and you just hit your day as hard as you can. You put in your work and then you wake up and do it again the next day. And you don't think about the months. You don't think about the years. You focus on the day and you tackle your day and you hit it as hard as possible. And good days equal good weeks equal good months equal good years. And so if you focus on the day, that's all you can control, and that's all you should think about. And so that's how I basically got through it.
And so Natasha knows this. I have a saying, like there's only two things you can control: attitude and effort. So how are you have the effort piece down. How are you controlling your attitude during those days, the bad days, the weeks, the months? Because it's not as much as you got through it. There had to have been hard times. So how are you how are you controlling your attitude during those times?
So it comes back to where my story started, which is it wasn't harder than losing my mom. It wasn't harder than losing my brother. It was a, different type of hard, but I'd gone through a lot harder. And so I kept reminding myself that this isn't that hard. And I've been through worse, and I will get through this one. And so that's why you have to go through hard stuff. That's why you should throw yourself into tough situations, because then when you deal with other things that aren't as difficult, where most people will quit, you'll have, that experience and that mindset to get through things that other people will quit and walk away from, and you will push through.
I love it. I want to talk about the book real quick. So not everybody writes a book. Where did this come from? Where did it, not just where it came from, then how did you take action? A lot of people think about it and they don't take action. So walk us through that.
Yeah. So it's just kind of a life's work. So I don't want to talk about it too much without until I finish it. So without going into like what it is and everything else, just more or less my story. And it's a legacy piece to hand out to my kids and to everybody out there that needs kind of a roadmap to success. And I think that I have a lot to share. I think that my story is unique, and I have difficulties I've dealt with emotionally with my family, 20 years of helping people with their finances and how to structure them and credit and what to do, and seeing mistakes that people have made, my own investing in, wins and losses and things that I've done with and gone through. And so I feel like I have a lot to share, and it kind of tackles a little bit of everything. So it talks a lot about kind of your mind, your body, your heart, your soul, your finances, your health. It's kind of a digest on, things that are actionable items on all of those. And, my word last year was impact. And I decided to make my word this year, the carry on, was bigger impact. And so, I did a lot of soul searching and praying during the holidays. And I what spoke to me and what kind of came about it is you're going to write a book next year. And so that's what it just kind of came up. And so I wrote a goal.
Yeah, we look forward to it. We won't dive into it. We'll wait for the book. Then we'll have you back on. We'll talk about
teaser,
it.
Yeah,
yes.
Hopefully you like that teaser there.
That's good.
Hopefully you're interested.
He's like, I didn't plan on marketing you so soon, but here
we
go.
Yep.
So I want to, I know we want to get to kind of where you're at now and get some details on some of that, but you come out of that hard time, you're pushing through. So can you take us through that gap from then to now, your journey and just mortgage, kind of take us through to where you are today?
Yeah, so there was kind of a bigger transformation that happened, 13 years ago. So that was when I became a father. So I had my daughter, Addison. And when that happened, it was around a similar time that I kind of broke away from the call center kind of setup in mortgage industry. So for those that don't know, call centers you're basically kind of, they kind of have, where you just take calls and you work in kiosks. Everybody's all in there, all smile and dial. You pound the phones. It's just very salesy.
Very transactional.
Very transactional,
Yes.
Lacks service, lacks personal attention. So it was tough to get my footing in the purchase business. And, what I learned from some of the most wise individuals that's where the kind of long game is in the mortgage industry. So if you're going to stick this out, you need to kind of break off and start building your own brand and start doing your own thing, 100% commission, and, and doing your own thing and get into the purchase business and start creating relationships and service and being more focused on that. And then in the long haul, that's the better business model. And so it was really scary, but, going through with, my wife basically stopped working, take care of my daughter. And then I went, into the purchase business and kind of went that 100% route with commission.
And what's purchase business? Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, it's just a different model where you don't focus, like call centers are basically just refinance machines. So there's either a purchase or refinance when you're doing a mortgage transaction. And call centers are just basically refinance machines. And I was doing 20 loans a month, and it's just like your loan number 72, it's like that's how they treat you, right? And that's you don't even talk to the processors. They're in different buildings, and then you don't even talk to the underwriters. They're in different buildings, and everybody's kind of in silos, and it's very transactional. And I didn't realize that. You don't know what you don't know, but I realized it's just not the level of service that I wanted, because I cared about people, and enough time had gone by, enough promises were broken, and by management of like, oh, we'll be better at this, and clients weren't happy with the experiences of. I would do a good job originating the loan, but they wouldn't do a good job closing it.
And so you have a brand new daughter, your wife stopped working, and you come home and you say, "Hey, honey, I'm just gonna go out on my own." Is walk us through that conversation.
I was going to ask the exact same question. I was like, you have to tell us about this leave.
Yeah, so it was a couple years built up before that, because I made it through 08, 09, and then in 2010 they created this thing called the HARP loan, where people that were upside down and their homes could refinance now, and that started putting a couple extra loans a month into my pipeline and kind of helping me to start making some extra money and start saving. So I was actually able to build up a little bit of a savings in order to take this leap of faith. And it was just kind of what do I want to do? I want to bet on myself. That's kind of the decision I made, is that I can do this, same kind of thought as before, which is that I've seen all these other people doing it, and I think that I do a better job at mortgages than they do, and they're successful, and they made it, so I should be able to make it. And so I kind of had that same thought and was like, okay, I'm just going to go do it.
And so how long have you been married to your wife now? What's her name?
So her name is Adrian, since 2008. So we actually got married in the middle of kind of the crisis. Or
So-
kind of the beginning of it, before it all kind of fell apart.
I know we're kind of in the middle of the story, but it sounds like she's part of your foundation as well. Like
100%.
making that leap, like you can't do that without a partner that's supportive, it's coming through in your story, which is really cool. So you go out on your own, and we talk to entrepreneurs, business owners all the time. Natasha and I just went out on our own. So walk us through that first 3 months, and how many times did you say, "What did I do?" Or did it ever happen?
I never questioned it. I was just more like, I'm going to make this happen, and being a dad, the new fire of desire, like I talked about earlier, right? A new fire was lit, and my passion and motivation was higher than it had ever been. And I was more driven than I'd ever been before. And my purpose was so much bigger. And so I was made on a mission, and nothing was going to stop me. And so I just more or less was like, hey, how do I make this work? It wasn't if it's going to work, but how do I make it work?
And did you see success right away, or did it take some time?
Yeah, I saw minor success right out the gate. And, I'd say probably the first 6 to 8 months was just paying the bills. It was just, 1 month you'd get a couple deals, next month would be slow, so it was just kind of like limping in and limping by. But just kind of being able to get by and continue to learn and continue to grow. And then, really important thing about being any business person, especially in today's day and age with technology, you have to pivot and adapt. You have to be able to say, this is working, this is not working. You have to be able to change as things happen, right? So that's kind of what brought me into networking, which is kind of how I met you guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was you adapting into. So is that something that I'm thinking about the first year that you start a business, and like you said, you're getting certain deals, you're kind of building it up. It does take, like you said, the long game. You're kind of adding in. So networking was something that you hadn't really, I would assume in the call center, didn't really have to do that. So was that a new kind of venture for you?
Yeah, that's when it all started.
And started to build. Do you think that that's where you gained a different momentum, would you say?
Yeah, different momentum and just different way of doing business, right? You're more serving other people, right? The kind of, I know that many people here might not know about BNI, but it's a networking group and their focus is Givers Gain. Before I learned about Givers Gain, I knew Pay It Forward. And it's really big into just helping people. If I could, help, connect two people and add value somewhere, that's what it was about. So I've always been a connector and I've always been someone that cares about people. And so I just started kind of blending those things together and focusing on how can I help somebody and give a referral and help connect two people. And that's just kind of how I started it, was just focusing on what can I do for other people. And then naturally people that appreciate that and are like-minded will do the same for you. And so you start attracting people that are like-minded, which was, it takes time, but that's how kind of it began.
Yeah, and it's such a difference. So I grew up in the call center environment. So we talked about it, it's completely transactional. So you're going through this transition. How much freedom, do you remember freedom being a part of what you felt?
Oh yeah.
And was it like a light automatically went on, or was it a slow transition as you went from that transactional environment to you're running your own thing and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have to be somewhere. I'm good.
It's a double-edged sword though, right?
Yes, it is.
Because for you guys that don't know, you get freedom, and then now you have to make sure that you are responsible for yourself and that you are doing something every day and that you're taking actions, and you have to be self-motivated, and you got to get up and you got to make your schedule and figure out your activities. And it's a different type of freedom that is both good and bad, right? It's bad if you can't figure it out.
Yeah, I agree. And, what I've seen and from people I've talked to and gone through is the highs are really, really high. Like when you get some of those wins in the early years, it's like, wow, this is a big accomplishment. And sometimes those lows can be lows, even with the most positive mindset. Like you get a disappointment, you lose a deal or something. It's like, wow, you don't have that salary to lean on and things like that. It's like, I put a lot of effort into this, and you just have to pick yourself back up and say, okay, I don't get to go golf today. I don't get to go do whatever it is that I love to do. I need to focus on replacing that business. So tell us a little bit about the transition into where you're at today. Let's talk about what you do, what your role is, and how you got to this specific spot.
Yeah. So, talked about the connecting and, networking. And so one of the things that I really focus on is just growing my network of good people, right? I want to meet good people that do good business that can help my people. And so getting plugged in with different networking groups and in exchanging value, and then in turn making sure that my people know that they can always call me for any sort of mortgage help or needs, but they can also call me for anything else. And if I don't know somebody, I know someone who probably does. And so over the years, I've been doing networking for a long time now. I consider myself a master connector. And that's kind of like the highest level of networking and connecting, because I really have a nationwide network of people that I can help anywhere with just about anything. And it's really, really powerful. And so, if I'm giving advice to people that are starting out or trying to figure out what to do next, I would say start networking and figure out, an industry related kind of networking thing, a community-based one, and then maybe like a kind of more specific kind of closed referral group types kind of setup that you have where you have accountability, because that's what took me to today, which is, I tell people that 95% of the mortgage industry are loan officers, but I'm a senior mortgage advisor. And the difference between them is that an advisor, as an advisor, I really focus on educate, advise, strategize. And so I like to educate people about what to do and what their options are, and ask lots of questions about their goals, and then tailor fit a custom plan to whatever they're trying to do, and then advise them about, okay, we put together some strategies and here's some different options. Here's what you wanted to do. Here's some other options. And then knowing what I know and doing this for 20 years, if I were you in your shoes, this is what I would do. And that's the advising, right? Where the gold lies. With 20 years of experience doing, thousands and thousands of loans, this is what I would do if I were you, and here's why. And I think that the why is how I like to be taught and how I like to be sold and how I like to be educated. The why is usually what's missing for most. And let me give an example. Is like, I went to my mechanic recently, and when I did this, they were like, "Hey, we want you to replace this. What was it? The one of the gaskets or whatever was like leaking, right?" And they're like, "Hey, you need to replace it." And I'm like, "Well, leaking or no?" What they said is seeping. And so I was like, "Well, what do you mean seeping, right?" And they're like, "Well, over the top, like fluids are kind of coming out the top." And I was like, "Okay, well, can you just wipe the fluids off with like a towel? Like it's not cracked. It's like the thing works still." Yeah, And then I was like, "Okay, well, that's kind of weird. Like, so you can wipe it down, right? Yeah. Okay. What would you do?" And so I looked at the mechanic and asked him that. If this was your car, I'd probably just wipe it down. So then why are you telling me to replace it? Right? So when I got to the why and what would you do as the expert, then I kind of was able to kind of use my approach, right, back on somebody else. And, there's a reason why people call experts in every industry. It's because they're the experts and they have put in I think it's 10,000 hours to become an expert in a field. They've put in the time. They're the expert in that field, and you should probably rely on that information if they're trustworthy and they've been recommended to you. And I'm not in the lead business. I'm in the referral business. That's all I do is help people that I know or someone else knows that wants to talk to someone that's trustworthy, that knows what they're doing, that's experienced. And there's no extra cost to use me versus someone brand new in the industry. So it's like, why would you use, or maybe someone that just is a loan officer, right? Maybe just kind of order takes. So it's like, if it doesn't cost anything extra to use an advisor, someone that's experienced, and if your style is that you like to know your options and be explained to them, and then also have someone advising about what they would do as the expert, then that's a good fit for me. And that's the client that I, value and that values me. And so I look for mutual value.
When we talk about experience in any industry, the mistakes you made in those first 4 to 5 years, and maybe even further, that also leads to why you're an expert. Like once I've made mistakes with people's health insurance younger in my career, and either it's taught me not to make that mistake or it's taught me to check 10 other places before I take someone down there. Is that fair for you as well? Like in your industry and in your experience, do you look back and like, "Oh, I remember I had something just like this and messed that one up. That's never going to happen again."
Yeah, all I do all day is get calls with scenarios.
Yeah.
Hey, here's my scenario. What should I do? That's all I do. So ask any realtor or lender if, a couple, maybe tens of thousands of scenarios, if they've gone through those, if that would be valuable. Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
So I've done tens of thousands of scenarios and problem solved. So like what I do at the highest level is I'm a master problem solver, bottom line. Right. And so in my family and in my friend group and kind of what I do, everyone always calls me to like, "Hey, here's what's going on." And they always want to vent to me. And it's because, I think subconsciously they know I'm the problem solver. I'm the one that's always thinking about options and how to strategize and how to, "Hey, here's what you're doing. Okay, here's some recommendations," right? That's all I've been doing for the last 20 years. And so that's all I know.
Yeah, it's these are my favorite type of conversations, because when I take the conversation as a whole, and someone's coming to you, what I'm gathering and what I'm seeing is, you take the problem solving, you take the experience, you have a vision. Is that fair? You can see where you're taking somebody, whether it's within your industry or someone's just bringing you a problem. Are you able to see the end and how to get there?
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah. I think that a lot of times they're like, hey, here's my plan. And they've thought it and they know they think that, they've thought through like 3 bridges. I always say like bridges because they're like bridges is a problem. In the mortgage industry, they don't know that maybe there's going to be 10 bridges and number 8, it's going to break and fall and they're going to go in the water and they're not going to cross that bridge. So my job is to let them know, hey, here's your plan and here's where your bridge number 3, you'll get through that, but you're going to have a problem at number 8, right? As you get so far down the scenario, eventually you're going to run into some issues. And so again, that's where the advising comes in of, okay, yeah, like we can look at that in your option and then let's take a look at these other options and let me explain why this would be a better one for you and the issues and problems you might run into addressing it the way that you wanted to. And so that would be kind of how I would address that.
It seems too that it's not just about mortgages and like loan problems for people. Like we met you through BNI, through other, the network society. You're trying to help your peers, your friends, your family members. It seems like that's kind of your approach to life, of what you're about is like, it's not just the work, it seems like, for you. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, again, it's kind of like impact, right? And trying to help people. And it's just after you've done it for so long, right? You start going to people's events and then eventually you start throwing your own events or having your own events, right? That's kind of the graduation, right? So having the network society is like the mixer of like where kind of everybody in the community comes and we all network. And then I have more pick some people that would be good fits. And then we kind of down the funnel almost to like BNI where you actually build relationships and you get to know people and, you actually have really good friendships and relationships. And then, those are like that lead into eventually like, hey, let's go golfing, let's go disc golfing, let's go do this, let's go, and so you kind of have your flow of networking, I want to say, where it's like the big funnel, the medium, the smaller. And as you do it for longer, you realize there is a flow to it and there is a method to the madness, right? I don't just show up and try to meet everybody in the room. I try to have like 2 to 3 really good conversations with just a couple of key people and then do a follow-up and actually try to see if there's something there for both of us,
And talk to us about mentorship and leadership and what that means to you and where that's at in your life today.
Yes. So, obviously being a father, I think it started with being a dad. And, I think anybody can be a dad, but not everybody's a father. So being a father is my number one goal in life is to be to be a better father than my dad was for me. And he's a great man. So I have a big bar to meet. But with that said, I started going into kind of leadership. I like to coach sports. So I coach baseball and soccer and indoor soccer. I did 1 year of softball with my daughter and then tapped out.
It was too hard?
You girls are too much for me. The intensity of parents in softball, I'll tell you what. It's
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. Girls, the moms out there and the dads out there in the softball, they know. It's a lot.
Wow.
No, but I have 2 kids. I have a son and, Carter, he's 8 now. And, he was more or less like, at a certain point when he started getting into baseball, I was like, hey, I got baseball, you got softball. And we kind of did the divide. Yeah. So I've been coaching, baseball for 4 seasons, soccer for 4 and indoor soccer for 1. And I just enjoy helping people and kids more importantly in the growth and development and seeing that. Right. So that's a little bit of like the personal side. And then on the business side, again, kind of having the network society and being a co-founder of that with Amber. And then at BNI, I've been a 3-time president. So I've been the president 3 times and kind of always been in a leadership role over in BNI. And, I just enjoy, kind of being able to help people and offer value. Again, I think that a lot of the things that I do every day come down to value add and impact. And I think those are my 2 words that I really just try to like, and even for myself, right? Just how do I create value for myself every day? 1% growth. What can I do if it's just 50 push-ups before I go to bed, 5 pages in my book, just making sure I do something every single day for a little bit of growth and just making sure that I have that before I go to bed and then creating a little bit of value for someone else every day. Making that call, whether it's just checking in with somebody and how are you doing, whether it's, making a referral, calling and asking a question when someone asks me about something that, I ask another question back and kind of probe and realize that, well, maybe you need to talk to this person over here. And I made 3 really good connections with 3 people today where I know everybody and I've known them for a while, but I just connected 3 people today. And in the commercial real estate, construction, and investing world. And so I just made some referrals and connections a day, and it's like I get nothing out of that. But 3 people just might do something over there, and that's cool for them, and that's the value and impact it has created today. So, I feel good about, if I can do that every single day, I'm moving forward.
Yeah, servant leadership also comes to mind when sitting here listening to you. For those who haven't studied or understand it, like that comes to mind when I'm talking to you, is servant leadership. It's been an incredible conversation. The time always goes fast for us. So we have a couple of staple questions, and I think I'm going to have to start placing bets on what I think people are going to say. So success is defined in a lot of different ways by a lot of different people. So how do you define success for you? What is the definition of success?
I would say, for me, comes around kind of mind, body, heart, and soul. So making sure that I'm in alignment with who I am and that those things feel right, and that I'm having, so that I'm in the right space, doing the right thing, going out into the world. And so, I don't think that you can help others and you can fill other people's cups up unless yours is first. So I take a lot of time to make sure that I'm mindful, that I do things from my mind, my body, my heart, and my soul. And so just having alignment there.
I love it. I'm going to switch up my staple question a little bit, because normally I ask, like, what would you tell your, past self, usually 30-year-old, but you've given so many like good gems of things. So what about to any early startup entrepreneurs right now that are listening? What would be one piece of advice you would give to somebody who's started their own business? Michael
Jordan's missed more shots than anybody, right? You got to be willing to fail. I tell my kids, you got to risk it for the biscuit, right? So nothing risked, nothing gained, right? You got to go out there and you got to go take the risks. You got to go take the shots, as many as possible. You'll have some failures. You might fail a ton, but you'll learn from those fails, right? And if you fall forward, you'll continue to be kind of create a new step, and you'll step up and be a little bit better the next time around. And so just keep taking the shots, keep going. Don't be scared of failure. Failing is not trying. So I think that go out there and try as much as possible, and just be willing to learn and be humble, and just make sure that you know that the effort is what you can control, and the results will come if you continue to grind.
Thank you. It's such a good answer. And I say it's for the listeners, but I really ask it for myself. So
hey,
we'll both take the no. But thank you so much for being so open. Truly inspiring to hear the things that you've been through and the way that you look at it and have used that throughout your journey to just fuel you to take you to the next level. So thank you so much for sharing. Like, I always take a bunch of notes, but definitely have great takeaways from this episode. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And just want to give you a chance to your family, your friends, your network. Any parting thoughts?
Yeah. Big shout out to the wife, Adrienne von Bergen. And, I retired her 13 years ago, and she's been a stay-at-home mom, and that was the best investment I ever made. And everything I do is because she did that for me and our kids. And so I'm super grateful for that, and I think that she deserves all the credit at the end of the day.
That's a great way to end it. Thank you so much for the time today.